Medfield TV. Community shows.
Welcome to Talking Climate. I'm Fritz Fleischmann.
I'm Thea Iberal.
And we're broadcasting from Medfield TV, our local access television station in Medfield, Massachusetts.
And in this series of conversations, we interview activists, scientists, business people, students, anybody that's focused on this issue and have come to the conclusion that human civilization is the main cause of climate change in our time. And they are taking steps in the hope that this will help avert global catastrophe.
Today our guest is Carolyn Barthel, a climate activist and chairperson of the Greater Franklin node of 350 Massachusetts.
Hi,
Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. 350 Massachusetts is a statewide network of climate activists, all volunteers, and we have chapters from the Berkshires to the Cape, and it's and our focus is specifically on what Massachusetts can do to make itself a more sustainable state.
So could you tell us why you chose that this particular activity and action that you're doing, and what brought you to this conclusion that climate change is a critical problem?
Basically, the long and short of it is that I'm a mom. I feel that my kids are now 26, they're twins, and they're out of the house, but the thing I can do is still work towards having a future that could be feasible for them. So that's basically my take on it.
So can you tell us something about your work? What are some of the things you do, and how do you see this going forward?
I started the Greater Franklin node in Franklin because we are pushing hard to fight against the Spectra Access Northeast pipeline. And it's right in the middle of, there are a total of 22 towns that would be impacted by this project. And to educate people so that they can make a decision whether they would like to, this is a good thing or not. And most of the time when we presented the information, people are really worried and very concerned. So it's and recognizing that the state needs to do what it can to be to work with the Global Warming Solutions Act of 2008 that has certain climate goals for the state. So we're working on keeping the gas pipeline out, and we work with other nodes around the state to work on a whole statewide agenda of different campaigns.
Wow, it's really interesting. So what kind of activities that you do? You said about education, but what are some of the activities that you wind up doing?
Well, my husband and I have given a fair number of what we call pipeline presentations.
Who do you give them to?
Board of Selectmen, town community groups, just whoever is interested in becoming more educated about it. And and it winds up being that we've given a good number of pipeline presentations, but the other piece that 350 Massachusetts has two other pieces. It has several legislative goals to work with the legislature. So we make phone calls, we go and have rallies, and we go and talk to our legislators, and to push for particular bills that we think would be really a well-rounded take on how we can fight climate change. And we also have a campaign that's very grassroots. It's 100% renewable, to encourage all towns to have those goals and to work towards those goals. And we also work, 350 Massachusetts is one of the members of Mass Power Forward, which is a consortium of over 150 organizations in the state, of all kinds of organizations, environmental, social, community, religious, churches, all kinds of different organizations that want to have a sustainable Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm. So there, in the pipeline discussion, there are usually two kinds of concerns that people have. The one is that pipelines leak and are dangerous. They might be dangerous to the local community. And the other one is that building a fossil fuel infrastructure sets the scene for long-term commitment to fossil fuels, which of course stands in the way of switching to renewables. So in your presentations, in your conversations with your audiences, where is the focus? What are people most concerned about?
Oh gosh, well, we have a very thorough presentation, because you don't really know entirely what is going to grab people's attention. For some people, it's climate and the methane going up in the atmosphere, which is 86 times worse than carbon dioxide. Whether it could be that, it could be the fact that pipelines leak and they can explode. And then you also have the idea that yes, that this fossil fuel infrastructure will be dedicated to having this for decades, and we won't really be able to use it if we're going to really. We'll have to shut off the valves at some point,
right,
before the pipeline is fully used. The lifeline of the pipeline.
Right. So in our conversation with people locally, we often hear the argument that natural gas is the bridge fuel to the future. And in fact, we heard some of this in the recent presidential debate. Is this an argument you encounter when you give your presentations? I mean, are there defenders of the gas infrastructure?
I think, I don't know that I would say that people are defenders, that because we really try to make it very clear that yes, people do see it as a bridge fuel, but really it is a fossil fuel. It is not a bridge fuel, and the leaking is as bad as is equivalent to coal, burning coal. Right, right. So we try to meet people where they are, recognizing that this is fighting climate and thinking differently about the fossil fuel infrastructure is really relatively new. People are still thinking in terms of, oh, well, yes, we need to have this infrastructure to be able to have our civilization, but we're needing to find out another way to do it, to be able to have a climate that is sustainable and still have civilization.
Yeah.
So when you're talking to people, climate change sometimes feels like it's way far off. It's going to happen way, way far in the future. So are there kind of challenges that you experience when you talk to people about climate change, and or is everybody on board now at this point?
I think most people are on board. They recognize that the weather is not what it used to be, and they're seeing all these catastrophes that are happening around the world. And here in Massachusetts, we had a terrible drought. And so they're beginning to recognize, yes, we are in the middle of it, and I say that. We are in the middle of it, and now it is our job to keep it from getting worse.
Yeah, the challenge, of course, is to bring everybody along, right? Yep. To step outside one's own circle of comfort and information and make sure that people who either don't know about it or who have bad information, who have been brainwashed by the defenders of the fossil fuel industry come along. So this is a climate justice issue as well. You can't leave people behind who are inarticulate, who are uninformed, who are often most affected by climate change. So in what ways would you say that your activities pertain to climate justice? Is that in the conversation?
It is a bit. I would say that the towns that are impacted by this particular project, the Spectra Access Northeast project, are. I would not say that these towns come under any climate justice issue so much as the fact that recognizing that we only have one atmosphere, and if we continue dumping carbon dioxide in it, then the people who are most affected are going to be those who are people of color, and so we do mention it, but it's not a major focus. Although I'm certainly interested in having a goal that I have is to have some picketing in front of a TD Bank in the area, and to educate people and pass out flyers and have them understand that the Standing Rock Sioux are being impacted by the investment of the TD Bank as one of the financer entities that is supporting the Dakota Access Pipeline.
Yeah, so let me just clarify what I meant by climate justice.
Okay.
You know what it is, but not everybody in our audience may be familiar with that concept. So climate justice, globally speaking, means that we need to look at places in the world that contribute very little to climate change but suffer the most. Bangladesh is a famous example. The oceans are rising, salt water is pushing inland, destroying agricultural land, creating a huge refugee problem, and so forth. Here in Massachusetts, climate justice takes different form. So you have people who live next to pipelines or projected pipelines who worry about their safety and the methane seeping out of the ground where they are, but they bear the burden of energy security for those of us who live far away from a pipeline and who might be heating our houses with natural gas.
Yes.
So
Okay.
even
Right.
in a place like Massachusetts, there's an unequal burden. But of course, climate change affects everyone sooner or later. So there is the larger scene, you can say it affects us all, and then it becomes an ethical question. But that's a larger conversation.
Yeah, we do make a point in saying that the Access Northeast project would impact people in Massachusetts, and these towns will be impacted. And for the most part, Massachusetts is simply a conduit for this work and for this project, and it's a matter of you're right that all these towns, there are 22 of them, would be impacted, some more severely than others, but they're impacted just the same, and really Massachusetts is not really going to benefit very much at all. And
So you said that there's rallies. Are you out there picketing? And have you been arrested? If I can ask that.
yes, I have been arrested for civil disobedience twice.
Yeah. How'd it feel?
They make it very clear in the training that you agree to nonviolence and that you recognize that once you participate in this, you give it up to the legal system, and you are not in charge. You are in custody, and it can be hot, it can be uncomfortable, and you don't really quite know how it's all going to play out. Civil disobedience is not for everyone. Not everyone can do this, but I feel that at this point in my life I can do this, and I can contribute in drawing attention to the situation that might otherwise not get much press.
Mm.
So, yeah, it's the name of the game is in doing climate work is outreach and in educating as many people as you can about this, having them appreciate the consequences of inaction, and also having recognizing that it's death by 1,000 cuts. That's a phrase that we use. That whatever it takes to be able to get the point across that this is not a future that we want to support, to have more fossil fuel infrastructure if we're going to have a sustainable planet.
So you're really down there in the trenches at the front line there.
I have been,
yeah.
And I know of other people who've done even more.
Yeah.
So, the biggest, most successful movements have always embraced civil disobedience.
Yeah.
Women's rights, women's vote, civil rights, gay rights. All of these issues have been been given attention because of civil disobedience, because you see an injustice, and that's and people are called to respond.
Yeah, I was listening on NPR yesterday to a historian talking exactly about that. That there is the government, but there is in the lawmakers, but there's also the people, and the people are a really important component of the whole democracy. And so you're right, putting our bodies out there and saying what it is that and demanding what we want and need is an important component of our democracy.
I find this so interesting because civil disobedience is at the same time a manifestation of trust in the legal system. You trust that you're not going to be abused, you trust that you're going to be treated respectfully if you treat the legal system with respect as well, because the legal system is what holds us together.
Yep.
It gives us rights, it limits rights as well, right? Bill McKibben, in his most recent book, Oil and Honey, which came out to 2013, I think, talks about what it was like getting arrested in front of the White House with a lot of really senior distinguished people, deans of major universities and politicians and what have you, clergy people. And it was striking how amicable the whole thing really was. They had informed the law enforcement people that they were coming. They did not resist arrest. They, handed in their watches and wallets and whatever it is that was taken. So I find this an interesting phenomenon that can be successful as long as both sides respect the rules. And that is, of course, the foundation of a civil society, that we know what the rules are. But it is, I understand that it's risky. You don't want to do this except as a last resort when people are not listening. So in your discussions with people about climate, when you go around talking to these audiences, what is it that people are most concerned about?
Probably the leaks.
The gas leaks?
Gas leaks.
Yeah.
And explosions. I mean, it certainly is a when pipelines leak, there's a low probability of their having eruptions and explosions, but it is there. It is non-zero, And when they do, it's very spectacular and very scary.
Yeah, but it's always the immediate thing, right? What's close to home.
That's right.
Is this going to blow up 100 yards from my home, right?
Yeah.
So what about the long-term concerns? Is the sea level around Massachusetts going to rise? How much temperature increase should we expect? What about the humidity in the atmosphere? More infectious diseases? Everything that is attached to climate change. Are people talking about that, or is that something that you have to bring into the conversation?
When we do our presentations, we are really focus them and customize them for each town, so that they see the route of the pipeline, proposed route, and we show the evacuation zone on either side of the pipeline, and I think those concerns may be there, but people are really concerned with what's in front of them, what is happening to their town that they have a sense of ownership about. So we don't really talk about sea rise. We don't talk about that the Back Bay will be the new Venice.
So you're really focused.
Yeah,
It's
we
very
really
good.
focus
Very
on
good to
what
focus.
is in front of us and how is that going to impact our state and your town.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that people could do? Do you talk to them about things they can do? Like
We do. They can, if they are in a butter, they can rescind
in a butter?
and a butter to the proposed route,
So their
so that
Their house is
their house
is within this evacuation?
Yeah, they would be likely part of an evacuation zone, within the evacuation zone, or near it, depending on the property.
So if the pipeline explodes, their house would go up?
Yep.
And that's what an abutter means?
Yeah, their property backs up to this project in its current iteration uses the utility corridor where all the high tension wires are. And
So
so
you're saying
if their property backs up to that,
They're putting the pipeline where the electricity wires are? I see.
in that vicinity. It's a corridor. And it's the easiest way for a pipeline to be installed because there already is an easement from the utility and stuff like that. So it's a matter of they're taking the route of least resistance in terms of having the not going straight through some subdivision that it doesn't have anything else going on with it, that sort of thing. So it's mostly what most people are really worried about is what can I do? And so if they are in a butter, if they are actually have and as in a butter they should have received notice of from Spectra that they are in a butter to this proposed project, and they would have surveying permission to give, or if they've already given it, they can rescind it, even if people have already given the permission, I figure there's no harm in rescinding the permission, the survey permission, because Spectra could change the route at any time in the project, and so who knows? They might change where it is on your property, and they wouldn't be able to be on your property once you've rescinded. So other things people can do, they can certainly organize as a town and educate other people and educate their town leadership and work with them to help them understand how the impact is. And they can, there's a possibility of working together in a coalition with other towns perhaps. We'll see how that plays out with this project. So they can pass ordinances that would be protective of their town's water, for instance, their aquifer, their wells.
So it's all really working at the town level.
Yes.
Do you have a website?
We do. It's called nospectrama.org, and people can learn about it. Just the basics of how basics about the project, learning what, just becoming. It's a very climate change requires learning so many different areas of expertise. You need to learn. You need to work with your legislator to educate them. You need to do organizing within your town. You need to become knowledgeable about environmental concerns. There are just so many different arenas that are affected by a project like this.
So your focus is very specific on the Spectra pipeline, the pipeline infrastructure in general. What are the informational side effects or fringe benefits, if you will? In other words, how many people walk away from this exposure thinking about lifestyle changes, about all the other things one can do to slow down climate change? Do you see much of that, or do you feel that people, if this pipeline project went away, that people would simply go home and continue with their lives? Or is there a lasting effect in your estimation that people take away and say, we really have to think hard about the way we live in this country?
Mm-hmm. I think it's some of both. Knowing that as human beings, as you said earlier, if it's in front of us, we deal with it. And if it were to go away, some people I know who have said, oh, well, I'm fighting this, I'm going to keep on fighting, even if this project goes away. And other people have said, I don't know, I may not feel so keenly about climate change, if this project goes away. So, different, I don't know that you can really say that it's a full, it's one way or the other. I think certainly as if people are aware of the weather, aware of the news, certainly they're paying attention and recognizing there are all these indirect effects. And I know that I'll be a climate activist for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this for a number of years, and I've come to the conclusion that climate communication is perhaps the biggest challenge of all, because it requires us to do something we don't normally do, which is to think in the long term. And it's also a question of imagination, not only knowing what you know, but also being able to imagine what's going to happen 5, 10, 15 years out. That's a big challenge. Yale University has a project on climate change communication that addresses this. They do a lot of surveys asking people, what do you know, what do you think is going to happen, what do you think we should be doing, with some really interesting results. And there's often a split between knowing something and being willing to act on it.
Yeah, to actually start using less electricity, or using less gas. I mean, I have a gas stove in my house, and I use gas to heat up the house, and I mean, I think about that, and I don't want to use it, but I'm not in a position to change, this place that I'm living in totally. And it's just, we are the enemy, because we are using this materials that we don't want to be using, that we're fighting to stop using. It's a real problem.
Yet I'm encouraged every day with just the responses that I'm seeing, that solar is just taking off like a rocket, and Massachusetts will eventually have some significant wind power, and the price of solar has gone down tremendously, like something like 70%, huge. So and people are getting active. You know, they're having divestment happen. You know, different churches, different colleges, different institutions are divesting and saying that we want to delegitimize the fossil fuel industry, and people are driving electric cars. I think every day there is good news out there, and sometimes you don't know whether people are motivated by the bad news or whether they're motivated by the good news. They're encouraged by that, and so we have a Facebook page, and it's called the Greater Franklin Node 350 Massachusetts, and 350 Mass, and I try to encourage, show that it isn't all doom and gloom. We do have solutions. We have them right now.
This is really important. We have just 2 more questions.
Sure.
I'll ask the first one. What do you think are your biggest challenges in your work?
The sense of urgency. The sense of urgency. If we think it's going to happen a long time from now, it's not going to be pretty for our children. It will not be pretty. It will be really very scary. And the sense of urgency, that is part of human beings, of our human nature, to just someday, one day, put it off. So the sense of urgency is really important, and the other piece is the recognizing is wondering, what can I do? I'm just one person. I can't do a whole lot, but the recognizing that if you join other people in whether it's fighting a pipeline or having your town do 100% renewable. Have those goals to change the light bulbs to LED light bulbs on the street lights, and encourage solar with a Solarized Mass program that's available through the state, which is a phenomenal program, and all kinds of things. It's a matter of recognizing that it isn't just the one person. It's when you join with multiple people that you actually make a difference.
Yeah. So in 20 years, can you think of what the world would be like, and what you're worried about and what you're hopeful about?
I am hopeful that we will have jumped on the bandwagon quickly enough that we will keep the very worst from happening. And the part that I'm worried about is if we don't do that, people will be going around and saying to each other, well, why didn't you warn me? Why didn't you tell me that life is going to be like this, that there are going to be food shortages, there will be catastrophic weather that is, and that the world will not be able to keep up with the impact of all this catastrophic weather, and that there will be mass exoduses of areas in the world where it is not sustainable to live there. So, we have a choice to not make it as bad as it could be.
Carolyn, thank you so much. Thank you for listening. Talking Climate from Medfield TV.
The preceding was a production of Medfield TV.